are listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, welcome to our virtual discussion on learning environments. My name is Beth Rudd from Ithaca College in New York, and I'm the Professional Development Coordinator for SIGUX, and will be helping to facilitate this discussion. Matt Feldhausen, Associate Director, Academic and Research, University of Rochester, is also on the line, and he's actually going to be facilitating this discussion. Before we jump into the webinar, let's go over some information about GoToWebinar and some rules of the road. Now, for today, we have a fairly small group participating. So in the past, we've muted everybody, but I'm actually going to try to unmute everyone so that everyone can join in the conversation. So let me unmute everyone now, and we'll see how that works. If we find that we're getting too much static, then we will go ahead and not use this feature. All right, can everybody just say hello, and we'll see how this is going to work?
Hello.
Fusette, are you there? Dan, are you there?
Yes, hello.
Hello, Kathy? Kathy, I'm not sure we could hear you. Larry, are you there? Lisa, are you there?
Yeah, I'm going to stay muted though.
All right, great. And Steve, are you there? All right, so we didn't hear from some of you, but we'll try this and see how it works. I believe you do have an option right now to mute and unmute yourself. Kathy, I see that you have a question about your headset with your microphone on. No problem at all. You can either just listen or you can dial into the phone. All right, so we're just going to try and see how this works. So if you want to unmute, you're all unmuted now, so if you have a question, just feel free to join in. And we'll see how this works. You can also raise your hand if you'd like. And Dan, I see that Dan, you had your hand raised.
I was just trying to figure out how to mute myself, and I figured it out.
Wonderful. There's also a chat feature, so you can always send a chat message to either, I believe, to me as the organizer, and then I'll try to answer you or bring it to Matt's attention. You should be able to see the attendee list, so you should be able to see who else is attending. Thank you for being part of this discussion. We're looking forward to learning from each other. So right now I'm just going to turn it over to Matt. So let me just go ahead and make Matt the presenter, so we'll be seeing his desktop.
Okay, hello everybody.
It's giving a little feedback, Matt.
Yep. I think someone's got their microphone up. Okay, yeah, that's a little better now. Welcome everybody. We are trying something new today with actually, Beth, can you mute everybody?
Yes, I can. There we go. Everyone's muted, Matt.
Okay, you can hear me however, right?
Yes, I can.
All right, thank you. Sorry about that, folks. I was getting quite a bit of feedback in my own headphones. I'm Matt Feldhausen, Assistant Director of Academics and Research at the University of Rochester. I wanted to give you a little bit of an introduction as to why I'm facilitating this discussion, but I am not by any means an expert on all these topics, so we are inviting feedback from those of you in attendance on what's going on at your particular institutions. The University of Rochester is a private research institution. It's a relatively small Tier 1 research institution with about 5,400 undergrads and 3,200 graduates. My role at the university is supportive technology in teaching spaces. That includes, but is not limited to, public computing. We build and support the technology-enhanced classroom, so all auditoria, all classrooms, conference spaces, etc. To date, we've built more than 130 such spaces to a given standard, which includes control systems and a standard user interface in terms of control panels, etc. We are getting involved in video services which have to this point included streaming events such as athletic events or special events for our reunion weekend or our commencement weekend. More recently, we've been getting into some conferencing support. A lot of that has been ad hoc activity, such as instructors wishing to integrate Skype or similar technology, chat-style technologies into their coursework. And most recently, we have been in a pilot phase for recording lectures, in our case using Panopto software. And we can discuss that in more detail. Since we had a broad number of topics, what I wanted to start with was a poll to gauge what the overall interest was in the topics, and then I will go through the topics in the order of preference. That way, if we don't get to all the topics, we'll at least have covered the ones that have the most resonance with the group. So, Beth, if you don't mind, can we start with the first poll?
Absolutely.
Okay, what I would like people to do is select three of those topics as your preference. We'll just take a few seconds to do that. And then I'll go in order.
Now we've got 56% of the people have voted.
Okay.
Is there anyone else there that still is planning on voting?
I have not voted, and I'm probably skewing your results a bit.
We're up to 67%.
No, I think that's good enough.
Alrighty. There are the results of the poll.
Okay. Well, that's good. I'm just sorting my view here. Okay. Distance and online learning. This is an interesting one for the University of Rochester because this is historically an area that we have not had much going on. A lot of that has to do with historically, and by historically I mean over the last 10 or 15 years, there was a intent to remain a residential community or a residential college. So the coursework was meant to be contained within the boundaries of the institution. There was concern on the part of the faculty that any distance or online offering would erode the reputation of the institution and of the individual faculty. There have been isolated pockets of distance learning within the individual academic divisions of the university, mostly to support either specific faculty requirements or a collaborative need that had to happen. But by and large, as an institution, there was quite a bit of resistance to distance learning. Some things have started to change. You've got the University of Phoenix that's making headlines, but that's headlines in both directions. One is people look at the sheer numbers of Phoenix and wonder what that means. Others look at the fact that there's only a 12% graduation rate and point to that as Exhibit A as to why you don't do distance learning. But specifically to the university, the president in the annual address to the Faculty Senate this year issued the quote that I included on this slide, essentially saying that this is not a replacement, but rather a complement to the core mission of a university, and if implemented with the cooperation of faculty and deans, can be successful. So we are actively looking at how to incorporate distance learning and online learning into all levels of the academic experience, and that's being headed up by our provost at the moment. So what I wanted to start with, rather than cover each of these questions specifically, is I did have a poll specifically for this slide to gauge where people are with this particular topic. So Beth, if you could put that poll up.
That poll's available, Matt.
Okay, thank you. And with this poll, I'm just curious to see where everybody else is in their thinking on this. My guess is that most of you do have an LMS. And Beth, did I see that Kathy has a question?
No, that was from previously.
Okay.
Matt, we've got 63% have voted, so I think
Okay.
that sound good?
Yep.
There you go, there are the results.
Okay. As expected, that's not entirely surprising. I'm glad to see that no one is indicating that they have no distance or online learning options. What are other schools doing? I've covered some of what we're doing. I can talk more about what we've done relative to our LMS, streaming and video conferencing, but again, we want this to be a roundtable discussion. Is there anybody that has something that they want to contribute?
Go ahead, Dan. Dan, I've unmuted you.
Okay. Okay, thanks. I had to unmute myself too. So over at Colorado State, we actually have an entire school in our university system called CSU Global, which is an online-only curriculum. So we have a pretty extensive distance learning offering there. Now at our at Colorado State University in Fort Collins, we have a pretty limited situation of distance learning. We actually have a distance learning department that helps different colleges and programs develop their own online offerings. For example, our business college has a very extensive MBA program offered online, and it's a pretty big revenue generating program. And the College of Engineering, where I'm at, has some distance learning, and we're actually moving in that direction a little more purposefully. I think so far it's been really piecemeal, and we haven't had a really good strategy across the university for supplementing with distance learning, and that's I think the goal for the most part.
Dan, when you say that there was a marked or a noticeable revenue stream for online learning for the business school, do you have a sense of what the enrollment is specifically for the online offering versus your brick and mortar offering?
I don't have that. However, the College of Business does not have hardly anything with any research revenue, and yet they are, I guess I could say, one of our more wealthy colleges, primarily because of those distance learning revenue generating operations.
Okay. And it is the same faculty that are teaching both your on-campus and your distance offerings?
Yes.
Okay. Are they the same course, in fact? So you could have potentially the same experience from a distance perspective versus an on-campus perspective, or are they taught at different times of the day?
I'm not very familiar with the courses themselves. My understanding is that the programs are the same, but they do have, they're oriented towards evening classes and different schedules than the traditional in physical classes.
So these are live classes. You're not recording them for viewing later on?
I'm not quite sure about that. I know that they do a mix of both, but I can't say which way they're weighted.
Okay.
Dan, there's also another question. How are you doing the live streaming of classes?
Yeah, again, I don't actually know that. It's not my area. I just know that it's happening from discussions with other folks. But I can find out.
That would be great. I know there's some interest in that. Matt, are you doing any live streaming of classes?
We have in a very limited way. We've actually done much more live streaming of special events, especially for our reunion weekend. We've had speakers on campus such as Bill Clinton, where the popularity of that event was such that we exceeded the physical capacity of a space, so we ended up simulcasting that event to other locations on campus and to the outside world. By and large, what we've done is we've used a Darwin streaming server, which is a free version of the QuickTime streaming server. It's a limited version of QuickTime streaming server. But we also have contracted with outside companies to handle some of our larger events. So the equivalent of a live stream or Limelight. There are a number of companies out there, Akamai, that will give you much greater capacity than you could otherwise afford to provide, and that's worked out fairly well for us.
Great. I think that answered the question that came in.
Okay. To the 80% of the people indicated that the web conferencing and collaboration tools were being used. We do have a WebEx system in place on campus. That's a fairly recent offering. I'm not aware of it being used for classes unless if it's being used for classes over at the medical center. Adobe Connect has also been used on campus, I believe most recently through our writing program and also through our Warner School of Education. But again, these are tools that are used in pockets of the university and not in a cohesive manner across the entire university, at least not yet. Are there other schools that have incorporated? Well, obviously there are because you voted it as such, but are other schools willing to talk about how they're using WebEx or Adobe Connect in the academic setting?
Dan, you're up again.
Well, if nobody else wants to talk, I just quickly want to say that we're doing pretty much the same thing as Matt, just piecemeal. I've used Adobe Connect. I have some people using WebEx, even Skype, all sorts of different things.
Okay.
Kathy Fletcher. Go ahead, Kathy. I just unmuted you, Kathy.
Okay. Well, while we're waiting for Kathy, I can talk a little bit about Skype and other video conferencing offerings. There are many things going on in the classroom that we're not even aware of because we don't have an official video conferencing offering that's been made available to the community. So faculty have been using Skype. They've been using Google Chat, whatever they're most familiar with on from their personal lives or perhaps from other colleagues. The most interesting one that has been used is something called DVTS, which was used by the Eastman School of Music. They used it to have a performance, a joint performance between our campus and a campus in Scotland. And the reason why DVTS was used is because of its low latency, so you were actually able to have a musical performance across that distance without a perceptible lag on either end. So it's an interesting example, but it's not really something that scales very well. But again, it's more an indication of our reluctance to adopt distance learning and video conferencing to this point.
Hey Matt, Barbara Friedman has her hand raised, so Barbara, I'm just going to unmute you.
Okay, Barbara?
Barbara, are you there from Cornell? Okay, she might have turned away.
Okay. I think what we'll do then is, if there are no other comments about distance and online learning, we can move on to the next topic, virtualization.
Sure.
Okay. Here again, this is something that we are not doing much of at the university in a desktop setting, but we are looking at options. We've done much more with virtualization in the server side. However, given the constraints of budgets, which we might get to today as a topic, we are looking at virtualization as a way to, Beth, I'm sorry, is that you typing?
It is.
We're looking at a way of using virtualization to extend the lifespan of the public machines. So right now we used to have a 3-year replacement cycle for computers in the public labs. We are, due to budget constraints, looking at extending that to 4 or 5 or perhaps beyond, with obvious implications of performance and overall reliability. What virtualization would allow us to do is extend the performance to an extent. Some schools, Lemoyne comes to mind, have a plan of perhaps even getting to a 100% virtualized model, both in terms of the public labs but also all desktops across the institution. That's a small Jesuit school outside of the Syracuse, New York area. I don't see the university getting to that point, but I do see us at least aggressively looking at it for a option to a physical lab space. Here again, as I'm interested in hearing what other schools are doing. Certainly there are many ways of approaching virtualization. Are you virtualizing specific applications? Are you virtualizing the entire desktop experience? Are you limiting the audience to just executives, or are you going more broadly than that to include students, faculty, and staff? What's going on with virtualization? Does anyone have something that they want to share? Beth, are you seeing any hands? Okay. I'll take that as no one has anything that they want to share, and you were hoping to hear more. So I apologize for that. We don't, at the university, we don't have much to share yet. What I am doing with my team at the moment is we obtained a VDI in a box from Dell, which is essentially a virtual desktop environment that's contained within one server. All the components of that virtual environment exist within that box, the licensing, the web services, everything. They shipped it to us in a packing case. We got it online with a couple hours of technical support with them over the phone, and we are evaluating whether it would in fact be suitable for a public lab environment. So far performance has been reasonable, but it's not what I would characterize as being a great alternative for a physical lab for more intensive work, especially work that involves more memory. Other than that, we have a VMware environment, like I said, for our servers. So I couldn't tell you how many servers are virtualized at this point. It's certainly a large number. But there are still a number of cases where we have to have a physical server for specific reasons. Streaming would be one example where we have to have a non-virtual environment to provide streaming services.
Matt, I do want to, Dan couldn't hear me before, so Dan, go ahead. Do you have something about virtualization?
Oh, sorry, I didn't catch that. You know, I'm really curious to know where people are virtualizing, you know, with regard to admin staff, faculty student labs, because we have done some, but mostly just in the server back-end kind of stuff. We actually tried doing some virtualization in the labs and failed simply because of performance. So I'm curious what other people have experimented with or are doing.
And Dan, to clarify, when you were talking about performance, are you talking about the performance of the application within the environment, or simply just transporting the virtual environment to the workstation, wherever the workstation is?
The performance of the application within the environment. We have in the engineering college some pretty intensive applications that stress video processing especially. So we struggle with that. We actually use thin clients extensively, but we still struggle with that even with the thin clients.
Okay, so computer-aided design, things of that nature. Are you using it just in engineering, or are other academic disciplines also using the virtual environment?
Nobody to my knowledge is really using a virtual environment for labs at CSU.
Okay. So it's more faculty and staff.
If that, I mean, really the only places I've seen it is just in infrastructure with virtualizing servers.
Okay, so fairly similar to what we've been experiencing here.
Yes.
Matt, are there any other people or anyone else want to comment on what you're doing with virtualization? I'm looking for either hands being raised or questions coming in. Oh, Barbara, let me unmute you. How about now, Barbara? Does that work for you? From Cornell? Barbara wants to contribute. We're just not getting the audio going.
Can she type in the question instead?
I will certainly ask.
Okay.
Oh, she's got dialing in right now. I love Barbara's enthusiasm. Pick me, pick me. No, we can't hear you, Barbara.
Okay.
I know at Ithaca, we've just we've been involved in a major network project, so we're behind in virtualization, and I think that'll probably crop up in the next couple years, but we're definitely behind.
Well, while we're waiting for Barbara, since I mentioned Lemoyne, I don't represent Lemoyne. I just happen to know about it from a regional conference that we had a couple weeks ago. They are using the Cisco products that places a virtual environment in the switches themselves, and I'm blanking on their name for it. I'm sure someone else on the line probably knows it. One of the advantages to that, though, is the performance gains you get from having it directly at the router or switch level versus having it exist solely within a server environment. The downside to it, as I understand it, is if you were not planning on replacing all of your network infrastructure, it is a very pricey option to consider. They were just fortunate enough where they were looking at a global replacement of their network anyway. So at that point, it made sense for them to replace all the switch hardware with hardware that was optimized for a virtual environment. Okay, do we have Barbara on, or should I move on to the next topic?
I think Barbara's still working it. It still looks... Oh, there, Barbara? Barbara,
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Yay! So sorry about that. There were a couple of things I was going to add. For virtual computing, our College of Human Ecology at Cornell has been using Zen Desktop from Citrix for the last couple of years. And one of my colleagues actually has been taking some classes over there where they've done some pretty heavy-duty rendering of 3D models, and it's working just fine for them. What I was told was that there was a video, some sort of video option in the software that they needed to enable the video card in order to be able to do these renderings in real time, but they found that it is as fast or faster than some of the machines, some of the regular desktops that had been in use. So that's working out for them really well. And the other thing is that we're going to be having a pilot of Zen app for approximately 200 students this fall. We are targeting selected classes that use MATLAB specifically to find out. We're planning to basically watch how the students interact with it, whether they continue to go to the labs or if they just stay home and use MATLAB on their own laptops, or how they actually use it to help us determine how to go forward with rolling it out. Our end result, we hope to still have some classrooms with computers in them for labs, but push as much out to the end user as possible.
Barbara, I've got a couple of follow-up questions to that. In terms of benchmarking against desktop performance, how old or what age would you say the desktop machines are that they're comparing this to?
I could find that out for you. It's not something that I was directly involved in. It's somebody that I work with. Somebody that I work with who has actually been running it, and somebody else that I work with who's actually been a user on it. But I don't have all of that information.
Okay.
But if you could send me a couple of questions, I could look them up and share them with you that you could share out with the group.
That would be great. Thank you. And the follow-up question was, I believe you mentioned thin clients. Are you looking at converting Public Labs' existing hardware over to thin clients, or are you purchasing actual thin clients in those cases?
We're actually not in a hurry to go the thin client route. Since we went from a 3-year replacement cycle to a 4-year replacement cycle, we're doing an upgrade this summer and then skipping next year. And so we're hoping that the data that we get from our fall pilot helps us determine what kind of hardware, if any, we buy the year after next. So we may buy some thin clients just to try them out to see what we can and can't do with them. But we're not planning to, fully go the thin client route.
And when you go to a 3-year, from 3-year to a 4-year replacement cycle, are you increasing the warranty period for these machines at the same time, or are you sticking with the regular 3-year warranty that is typical?
We have upgraded we have extended the warranty on some, but not all. The idea being that for some of them we can just grab parts and replace the stuff ourselves. But for, I would say that we're getting warranties on probably about 3/4 of them.
Okay.
So, as we have some come out for this reason or that reason, we usually have leftover parts that we can, reuse in other computers.
Right. And I'm getting ahead of myself by a couple topics by asking that particular question, but
Matt, Dan has a comment or a question, I believe.
okay. Dan.
Yeah, I have two, actually. Regarding the thin clients, we use thin clients for about half of our lab machines. So we have about a total of 200 thin clients in the engineering college, and there's also one of our residence halls where they have thin clients in their dorm rooms that are connected to the same infrastructure. But we use them somewhat uniquely in that we don't actually have virtual desktops that we provision to the thin clients. They actually connect to a farm of physical servers. So we don't have that virtual performance hit on top of the thin client performance hit that we've seen. And also the replacement cycle, I know you got ahead of yourself there, but we have a 4-year replacement cycle in the labs, and we have always had that. And so that has definitely not changed.
Okay. So the same question applies when you buy a machine for that length of time. Are you buying a warranty that covers it for that length of time, or is it going to have a year where it's out of warranty coverage?
No, we explored the option of additional warranty coverage and found it more cost-effective to just buy replacement parts when those components failed.
Okay. And for your thin clients, are these repurposed PCs or are these actual thin clients?
They're actual thin clients. We're actually converting from Sunrays to Wise clients as we speak.
Okay. The ones that are available through Dell by any chance, or
Yeah, Dell just bought them out. We actually bought ours just before Dell bought them.
Okay. It'll be interesting to hear how those fare, because that was another option for us also, is looking at whether those would suffice in some of our lab environments.
That sounds like a good paper for next year's SIGUX. Funny you should mention that. Okay. Any other talk about virtualization? We should have enough time to get to one more topic, if not two. Okay. Then the next one on the list that people identified was interactive technologies. And I'll talk about the U of R a little bit. My director, actually, Eric Fredrickson, conducts a student survey, an IT survey, every couple of years. And I wanted to highlight a finding that probably is consistent with other institutions also, where I didn't put this on the slide, so I'll just read through some of this. 94% of our students own a laptop, whether it's Mac or Windows. It's about 51% Windows, 43% Mac. 63% own a smartphone. Then the information I did put on the slide is that 97% of the students indicated that technology enhances the learning, and 3/4 of them want at least moderate, if not extensive, usage of that in the classroom. Now, that is in stark contrast to what faculty may necessarily want to do. And the student commentary went on to indicate that there were, in fact, some faculty that were not using enough of technology in the room or in the class environment. So I do have a poll for this particular topic, but I also have some more talking points. But Beth, can you bring up the poll for me, please?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And it has to do with clicker technology, because what's come up fairly recently is, bearing in mind those numbers that I cited with 63% ownership rate of smartphones and 94% ownership rate of laptops, the question is, should we continue to only look at options for clickers where you have to buy yet another device? So I'm curious to see whether other institutions have run into this and whether you're running into any support problems with this.
I think we've got 50% that have voted so far, Matt.
Okay. Well, I'll keep talking then. What we have at the university is no standard. If you're sensing a theme, we don't tend to standardize on much when it comes to this type of technology. Most institutions have probably run into this where the early adopter usually adopts a clicker because it was bundled with a textbook, and then you're held to that standard for as long as it's free. Our challenge has been that there have been at least 2 or 3 different types of clickers that have been used on campus, some easy to integrate, some not so easy to integrate. Luckily, through attrition, we've gotten that number down a bit. iClicker is the most commonly used one on campus, at least here, and we are looking at ways to better integrate that into our Blackboard learning management environment, mostly from a grading standpoint or importing results into the coursework.
Matt, let me go ahead. I can close the poll.
Okay.
We had about 50% that participated, and then Barbara has a comment as well, or has a hand
Okay.
raised.
Barbara, go ahead, please.
I was going to say this is, I wavered between yes and I haven't decided yet because this is another pilot that we plan to run in the fall. We're going to be piloting Pull Everywhere and also Learning Catalytics. Because it turns out that we actually have several faculty who are going out and using Pull Everywhere on their own, whether we support them or not. And we've gotten a lot of requests from people who don't want to make their students go out and buy iClicker.
Okay.
So I just wanted to say that that's how we'll be handling it.
Are you running into any resistance with students not wanting to bring their laptop to class?
We haven't had that yet since it's a pilot, but with Pull Everywhere, since it would take their cell phone or any kind of SMS text, that's going to probably be plenty for most of them. The only problem is that it's very difficult to require somebody to have a laptop or a cell phone, and that's the type of, resistance that we would expect to have. But it's something that we're calling attention to with the faculty before they participate in the poll, so that they're prepared for any kind of issues.
Right, and that's been the challenge at the University of Rochester also. We have been in the 90s in terms of student ownership of laptops for a couple of years now, probably more than a couple of years actually. But the issue is that students will also tell us that they don't want to carry those to class. Either they don't want the distraction or they want to leave them connected in their room for whatever purpose, hopefully not downloading movies, but generally the indication has been that they don't want to carry them around, and that's actually what's driven the demand for having kiosks across campus so that students can quickly check email without having to bring their laptop with them.
Kathy Fletcher has her hand raised. Kathy?
Okay.
Okay, I think this will work this time. Let me see. Yeah, are you hearing me okay now?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. All right, I switched headphones just for you guys. We recently switched from a model where we had clickers already in the classroom in a closed system, and we're just now getting ready to switch to where the students buy the iClicker 2, and we made that our undergraduate campus standard because our Health Sciences Center always goes off and does things on their own. And they're using a ResponseWare from Turning Point because they already require their students to bring laptops to class, and that way they can ask essay questions for pop quizzes. But for the main campus, what our pilot study task force committee decided on was having the students buy the physical clicker, because some of the instructors didn't want the students pulling out cell phones in class because of the distraction factor. But the biggest reason right now is we don't have the wireless on campus to support our large lecture halls. We have a lecture hall that can hold 350 students in just one end of one building, and we just don't have the wireless support for students pulling out mobile devices to do the interactive clicker stuff. So we went with iClicker 2. We're just now pilot testing integration with Blackboard Vista. It seems like it's pretty much a piece of cake in terms of the power link and doing what the faculty member needs to do. And I'm not sure what pushback we're going to get in the fall, because this will be the first semester that clicker using students will have to actually bring their own clickers to class. We just did some early adopters in the spring.
For the iClicker product line, have you been looking at the phone variant of it, or have you done any hybrid model approaches for faculty that are open to having phones in class?
We just decided across the board that we are not going to enable the web version or the phone version of it. We just, from a support point of view, an infrastructure point of view, we just decided our campus standard is you will go to a bookstore and buy an iClicker 2 if your faculty member wants you to use a clicker in his classroom, his or her classroom.
And do you have a trade-in program also, or do the students own it?
The students will own it. Our previous clicker set were purchased by the university, so the students don't already have old clickers. We had a few business faculty members who had done that going rogue thing where they had gotten clickers that were bundled with their textbooks, but it just so happens those were iClickers, the older model of iClicker. If the faculty member is still using just multiple choice questions, you can actually use the older model iClicker mixed in with the iClicker 2s.
Right.
And I don't know. We did a click-off last fall where we did we had faculty members willing to do 4 weeks with both Turning Point and iClicker, and then we came and had a reasoned discussion at the end, and iClicker was the unanimous choice from the faculty committee.
Matt, I have a comment. This is Beth from Ithaca, and we actually went through a review process as well in the fall, and we ended up going with turning. So we left the instruction mainly because there was they just weren't keeping pace with things, and we went with turning. But a lot of the decision making, I think, was influenced by our physics faculty, and they have some pretty power-heavy needs. But that was the device that we ended up choosing, and I believe with turning, I don't think we can disable the mobile device options. So we figure we'll have to go there just because we can't not go there.
Right. We were forced down the PRS path, formerly by Interrite, and I forget which company is representing them now, but the original version was an infrared-based system and not an RF-based system. And in terms of scale, they were trying to use it in a 480-seat auditorium. So you start running into line-of-sight issues. You start running into just performance issues. Can the receiver even keep up with that many responses at once? So support was certainly a headache. But again, because it was offered for free as part of a bundled solution with a textbook, we couldn't really make a case that this isn't something that someone should adopt. Because all the things that we as IT professionals wanted to see them use cost some money, and it's not a good position to be in. While on this topic, we had some other suggestions for discussion. Don't know if other people wanted to talk about iPads and how they're being used in classrooms. One of the challenges that we're starting to get into, sorry Beth, I probably threw you for a loop there.
That's fine.
The challenge that we're getting is now that the iPad is here and people know that you can use it with the Apple TV in terms of using AirPlay to display what's on the iPad on your projector or TV, is they expect that campuses are ready to support that without understanding that you have issues with the Bonjour protocol not always being allowed on campus or necessarily being compatible with the wireless setups that are in our communities. So this isn't an official poll, but is anybody out there using iPads wirelessly as a projection device within classrooms? And if so, how are you doing it?
Barbara has her hand raised. Barbara, go ahead.
Can you hear me now? We are actually able to have people project wirelessly, but they can't access the internet unless they are also going through a PC that's in the room. So we have a little portable setup that somebody can check out and take to whichever room they're trying to project from. And it consists of a little Airport Express and then an Apple TV and a HDMI to VGA converter. And we have all the instructions so that they can set it up. And I've had several people actually check this out. But because of the wireless network on campus and the restrictions that we have about having rogue networks on there, we are not allowed to set them up so that they can actually access the internet while they're doing this. If they do that, there are some programs where they can just basically mirror whatever is on their PC screen on their iPad and mark it up that way and still project wirelessly.
Okay.
Does that make any sense?
Yes, it does.
Matt, Kathy also has a comment too.
Okay, Kathy?
Oh, actually, I put my hand down for that, but I'm assuming that our iPad support on campus will be also limited by, wherever they can get wireless, they can use them, but it's not part of a formal classroom technology solution.
Okay, so you're not aware of anyone displaying from an iPad in the classroom, at least on a wireless side?
Not that I'm aware of, but we have such a large university that I'm mostly into the training aspects, and I don't do the classroom technology support, and I don't attend their meetings and that sort of thing, so I don't know what is going on, but right now most of our classrooms have a computer and pretty much the basic computer monitor, everything already set up and they're ready to go with a USB cable for laptops and stuff, or with the monitor cable for laptops. I don't know what the iPad toting faculty members are doing. I just see the iPad toting students all over our student union.
Which is leading to iPad toting faculty, at least here. It's been interesting to see that the adoption rate is quite different for the iPad than it has been for tablet laptops or any other emerging technology in recent memory.
Matt,
I think, oh, sorry, Dan, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to comment on the iPad display for projection. We don't. This has just come up. We were specifically forbidden from using wireless connection to a projection system because it apparently is not enough of a corporate standard with our corporate wireless technology that we have. Our networking group is working to identify something that can be used, but right now they basically said you cannot do this. What we have people do is connect via a wired adapter to some kind of projection system for iPads.
Okay. I think that's fairly typical, and yes, it does have to do with the it actually has more to do with the encryption that the Apple TV can handle, not so much a limitation of the iPad itself.
Right. Right. Interestingly, they kind of expanded that because the iPad issue came up. They expanded it to any kind of wireless display technology. So I hope they get that resolved soon.
Yeah, that might be taking it to a bit of an extreme. Okay, I see that we've got about 7 minutes left. We can try one more topic,
Matt, Barbara just raised her hand.
Oh, sorry, Barbara.
That's all right. I was just going to put in one more word, which was that our our classroom support people are putting together new classroom tier documentation, and one of the things on the wish list was a projector that could handle wireless iPads or wireless iOS, and Epson actually makes one. And so we've gotten some a sample of it, and I haven't actually seen it yet, but that is something that that's out there that people could try, and I can let you know if it works.
That would be interesting. I haven't seen too many wireless projectors that do a good job, at least in terms of a high-resolution image. It's generally a lower resolution, certainly not even close to HD quality. So usually the feedback that we get is, never mind, we'll just use a wired connection.
I guess we'll find out.
Right.
Matt, Dan has a comment.
Okay.
I have a nice solution, which is a $225 wireless projector gateway device, which handles Mac OS and Windows. It does not yet handle iOS, but I think it's a matter of time before they support it. As long as your network policy doesn't specifically forbid it, like ours does, it's a great little device. It's model, if you Google WPG-200N, you'll see what I'm talking about.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's 6 or 7 minutes. Let's go on to the fourth topic, and we'll just have to not talk about analog to digital issues today. Decreasing budgets, and I did have a poll topic for this one. And here I'm assuming that everybody has had a budget reduction at some level. So it's not really if, but given that budgets have been reduced, how are you compensating for those reduced budgets? My guess is it's all of the above. What I can talk about from the university standpoint is this is a very decentralized institution, so my comments are really focused on the undergraduate experience. We have had a budget reduction fairly substantial one that impacts both capital and operating for the next couple of years. And we have been looking at ways to address that without obviously impacting what we would consider to be core services. Some of the things that we are doing is we are looking at eliminating outmoded services. We are looking at charging for services that might have been otherwise included in a service agreement, a yearly service agreement. We have already talked a bit about extending the lifespan of computers earlier today. That's certainly something that we're looking at in this case. Speaking personally from a public lab perspective, we're looking at buying very few computers this year, but instead we are looking at buying solid-state drives for all public computers to extend their usable life, given that the drive, for one thing, has been what's failing after 2 to 3 years, and for another thing, that's what's holding the performance back. And since Dan mentioned papers for SIGOX, that's actually what I'm presenting on this fall, so stay tuned for our solid-state project. The last thing that we're going to have to look at is whether we are going to be able to repurpose public machines into department settings, because departments will often have computers that are even older than what have been in the public labs. So a public machine that's been in use for 3 years would be an improvement for them, but if we're now extending the life of those by turning them into thin clients or extending them to 5 years or more, they're no longer useful for departments. There are many other things that we're doing as well, but I'm more curious to hear what other people are doing or experiencing.
Matt, I'll close the poll, and I believe Barbara has a comment.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Barbara.
No comment, sorry.
So there's the poll results.
Interesting. So others have experienced staff layoffs also. It's unfortunate to see. And I think we've all, at some level, felt travel and training reductions, at least in terms of reducing the scope of where we can go, or are we going to national conferences versus regional conferences. The extending computer life cycle, actually Dan and Barbara, I believe you've both commented on this, but do you have a set lifespan for your computers, whether they're public or staff machines?
Dan, you're unmuted.
Matt, could you repeat the question?
Sorry. Do you have a set lifespan for your computers?
Yes, for our computer labs, it's 4 years. It's that hasn't changed in a very long time. For our other desktops, we recommend. We're also very decentralized, so we don't centrally provide desktops. Each department or unit buys their own, but we recommend 4 to 5 years on the desktops, and we actually stop supporting them after 6 years. We just say it's too old, it's not worth your time or ours. Get a new computer. So, but what we've always done is repurpose lab computers for department use. Even after 4 years, most of our lab computers are better than what many faculty even have on their desktops.
Okay. So there's a law of diminishing returns there. When do you pull the plug? Is it based on whether it can run the latest operating system? Is it based on number of failures in a given span of time?
We used to base it on operating system, but we just recently established the 6-year rule. Just finding that most of our things that were problem machines just were around that age range, and we just say that at that point it's past its useful life. And yes, you can keep it going, you just won't get support from us on it.
Oh, okay, so departments do have that option.
Sure.
That must be fun.
They don't usually take that route, but they do have that option.
Okay.
Matt, Barbara also has a comment.
Okay.
Okay, all of our external units, like the different colleges, are really in charge of their own computers and they set their own rules. But for our central CIT, all of our lab and staff computers have a 4-year replacement cycle, and it's the same as Dan, where after 4 years we find that especially the lab machines are still pretty healthy, and they get repurposed in all sorts of different ways. And basically, we just keep them running until nobody wants them anymore. And usually it's when they can't run whatever the latest operating system is. But they tend to go 6 and 7 years for most of the machines, because when we buy the lab machines especially, we usually buy really good solid machines with lots of memory and lots of storage.
Right. Okay, we are at 3:30, and I want to be mindful of everyone's time. So I apologize that we didn't get to every single topic here, but there's a lot of ground to cover. And I very much appreciate the comments that were shared today.
And just
Thank you, Matt.
in closing, I just want to let you all know this was recorded, I believe, and if all goes well, it'll be available on the SIGUX website, hopefully by tomorrow sometime. And also just a reminder that the SIGUX registration is open for the annual conference in Memphis this year. So we hope you can all join us there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.